Good morning, friends. Thank you for coming back to my channel to listen to another one of my reflections, my weekly reflections. Today I'm going to refer to lectionary reading. The lectionary reading for this Sunday, the gospel reading is Matthew chapter 25. And it is the story of the parable of the talents. I don't like that story. How's that for a starting point? Because it seems to be, when it's left on its own, to be suggesting that um, it's good to take advantage of others to gain wealth. So let me remind you of the story. A man, a rich man, he's going to go away for a while, and he gives 5 large sums of money to one slave, one servant. They call talents, but what they are worth is approximately the value of a, a peasant's lifetime's earnings, right? And a talent originally was a bag of gold the same weight as an average man. So you get the idea. So he gives 5 to one, 2 to another, and 1 to his last servant. Then he goes away, and months, year, whatever, later, he comes back and he calls them forth and says, okay, well, so what's happened? The first says, I took the 5 and I made it work, and I, gained more, and I got 10 more. And he says, oh, great, that's wonderful, and rewards him with authority over that and more. The second comes and says, I took the 2 and I've gained more, and here it is, 2 to 4 times more, 4 or 5 times, whatever. Um, that's great, wonderful. And the third man comes, the last one, who was only given 1 bag of gold, said that I knew you were cruel, and you take what is not yours, and you reap where you do not sow. So I just buried it in the ground and gave it to you and kept it safe. And here it is, back. He says, oh, you wicked person, you wicked servant, why don't you at least get interest for me by putting it in the bank? Away with you. Give what was his, give it to the guy that had the most. So there's a few pieces there before we go into the next portion of the story. A few pieces is that that last servant was actually acting exactly according to the law. The rich man was admitting that he sows where he doesn't reap, that he takes advantages of others, and he insisting on collecting interest was also contrary to the law. At the time, there was an understanding that there was a limited amount of resources and wealth in the world, and that if one person collected more, the only way they could do it is by taking away from others their share of the limited amount of resources. So everybody knew that rich men, if they're gaining in wealth particularly, were cruel, and they took advantage of the poor. That's just what everybody knew. If we leave the story just as that, we get a little confused because we wonder if this is what Jesus is saying the kingdom of heaven is like? Some people have worked hard to say, well, this is just, it's about talents, about our skills, and we're given these skills, we're supposed to use them. And if you have more skills, you have more expectations upon you. But no, that's not what this story is about. First of all, it's talents is just a translation of the Greek for a bag of gold. Not talking about skills. And secondly, this was the way of the world at the time. And at the beginning of this story, Jesus does not say the kingdom of heaven is like. What follows is the important piece. What follows in the Gospel of Matthew is Jesus saying, and the Son of Man, at the end of times, when he's sitting on his throne, will judge the nations, and he'll separate the sheep from the goats. You know this story. And he'll say to the goats, I was thirsty, you didn't give me water. I was hungry, you didn't feed me, and so on and so on. And they say, well, we don't remember that. And he says, whenever you did not do it for the least of my brothers and sisters, the least of my children, my people, you didn't do it for me. And then conversely, he says to the sheep or the others on his right, When I was thirsty and you gave me water, I was hungry and you gave me food, I was sick and you visited me, I was in prison and you visited me. Um, took care of the least, the ones that are struggling. So they say, oh, we don't remember doing that. And he said, whenever you did it to the least, you did it for me. So really, these stories are supposed to be the contrast. You're supposed to read them together. This is the way it is, but careful, this is the way you'll be judged. This is the way you'll be determined if you actually have encountered the Holy One in your life. So at times, at this time, in this pandemic time, we may feel like we're unable to do that. We may feel like, well, we can't go visit. How do we give food to the hungry and water to the thirsty? But of course, those are metaphors. And what it's a metaphor for is the idea of caring for those who are least, those who have less than us. And we are called then to not give up in the midst of all this, but instead to see the presence of Christ in those in need around us. And whether it's the homeless man on the street, or whether it's your best friend, or whether it's your neighbor or your daughter or your son or your grandchildren, or whether it's your parents, each act of kindness is an encounter with the divine. Each opportunity to care for someone in need, whatever their needs are, is an opportunity to encounter the divine. Christ is in the midst of us right now. In the midst of this pandemic, Christ is in the middle of it, walking about, encountering us and encountering the world as the ones who are struggling. And that may be you. You may be Christ to the other. You may be someone else's opportunity to have a meaningful encounter with the divine. What can you do? What can you do to make this world a better place? Just small acts of kindness, reaching out to one another with love, a phone call, a nod, a smile, a hello. Any act of connection, any act of affirming that person as a human being with all their needs is always, any of those things are always an encounter with the Holy One. You take the presence of Christ into the world, and you encounter the presence of Christ in the world through others and through your acts of love. Go make the world a better place. Heal the world and heal your heart. Blessings. God be with you. May you encounter Christ in your life, in the world, all around you.